Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We'll be starting very shortly, in about a minute, and I'll be happy to introduce the two presenters, Crystal Popke and Cassandra White, very shortly. In the meantime, you can type your questions into the chat area. I'd love to know where you're from, whether you're in Calgary. We've had an email from overseas wanting to hear to access the replay after, which we will have the replay after. So do type in the chat area, tell us where you're from, and tell us what inspired you to join us today. We have Judy from Calgary. Hello, Judy. Rue, Hassan Ali from Calgary as well, and Caroline from Calgary. Wonderful. Well, we're all in Calgary so far. Let's see who else joins us in the next few minutes. But in the interest of respecting your time, we have a lot to cover today. We have Erin from Okotoks and Sherry from Calgary. I hope I pronounced that right, Sherry. Thank you for sharing with us what inspired you was to learn how to communicate with your kiddo. She is 10 and a half, and I shared with her with her dad, so halftime, and when she returns, there's always a transition period. Wonderful. I appreciate you confirming that I pronounced your name right. We're hoping to gain some tools to connect with our soon-to-be 11-year-old as we embark on the fun teenage years. How brilliant and beautiful. Please do keep these items coming, and we'll read that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask these questions during the presentation, and we will do our best to respond to them. All right, this is, we're going to begin now. I'm just going to introduce the topic. It's called Connect with Your Child, and this is for 8 to 12-year-olds or parents or caregivers of preteens. So this is one that we're happy to present this time. This is a snapshot of our space in Calgary, Alberta. But I'd like to introduce right now to Crystal. Crystal, you'll have to unmute yourself because I think thank you for that. Crystal, would you introduce yourself and tell us who you are before I introduce Cassandra? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm so excited that we have the opportunity to share this with you. I am a registered. Imagine attachment is really near and dear to my heart. Most of the work that I specialize in is working with kiddos and their families. So attachment comes up all the time. And the thing that I love about it is that the more that I work with families and kids and work with the topic of attachment, the more that I'm seeing how applicable it is in a number of areas and how we can use tools that we kind of present as an attachment framework to a whole bunch of areas, including things like anxiety, family relationships, so parents and kids, even siblings. There's really good application there. So yeah, I'm really excited to share with you guys, and that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Crystal. And now I'd like to present Cassandra. She's the Director of Rocky Mountain Psychological Services. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Cassandra. I'm the Director of Rocky Mountain Psychological Services, and I'm a registered psychologist, and I am also a parent of 4 kids, ages 12, 13, 15, and 19. I've been doing this for a long time, and I am really excited about this attachment-based program that we're going to be doing tonight, and look forward to having Crystal be our main presenter. But in the midst of that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do and our philosophy. So Rocky Mountain Psychological Services is a private psychology clinic, and we are in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And we've been doing this a long time. I have been with RMPS, as we call it, for the past 7 years as the director and also as the owner. We've been working with kids and the adults who support them. That's really who we specialize in working with. And we've been around since 1996, started as a play therapy practice primarily, and in the last several years, we've grown into doing a whole bunch of different kinds of things. So we do therapy, which is traditional talk therapy, play therapy, groups like social skills groups, parenting groups, anxiety groups, ADHD parent groups. We also do neurofeedback therapy, which is brain training. We do assessments, which is, we do a lot of psychoeducational assessments, behavioral assessments, ADHD, autism assessments, gifted assessments. And we also consult with schools, preschools, workplaces, agencies, So we do a lot of different kinds of things. At RMPS, it's our philosophy that we really try to meet people with where they're at. Everybody, there's no two people or two families that are alike, so we really do tailor what we're doing to each individual person and family that we meet with. And we figure out what's really important to them and how we're going to meet those goals. Sometimes that's through assessment first, sometimes it's counseling or group therapies, and then sometimes there's a combination of what we're doing. With each of those things, we do try to, and we can just move this to the next slide. We do try to keep in mind kind of 4 basic tenets that we think about. We think about the self and which is how they see themselves in relation to others and the world. And then next, sorry, Crystal. Oh, there we go. Yep, mind. So we're thinking about the thoughts, beliefs, habits, and other patterns that might be impacting whatever it is that is the reason that people come to see us. Next, we have body, which includes awareness of body cues for stress, which is just one example, but also self-regulation and mind-body strategies. And then the last thing that we also consider is the role of relationships. And that's really what we're going to be talking about tonight, is the parent-child relationship and how this can be, just like Crystal was saying, how that relationship, that attachment relationship, can actually affect things and is a consideration, for treating something that may seem to a lot of people to be completely separate, like dealing with anxiety. So we think about all of these different things with our clients when they come to us. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to hand this over to Crystal to start our presentation for tonight.
Okay, so let's see if I can.
I'll turn my video off and mute myself.
Okay, perfect. So attachment, what is attachment? Some of you guys may have heard this word being thrown around quite a bit more in recent years. Other people, it might still be a new concept for you, but it really is seeing an increase in sort of our field. And so we thought we'd kind of go through a little bit of the basics first. So attachment is a relationship, all right? It's a fundamental biologically based human need. This is universally true. It is so important that people will actually ignore other basic needs in favor of creating or maintaining relationships. There's been studies that have been done, and we're literally talking like people will ignore food or nourishment if they have to make a choice between that and a relationship or that attachment piece. So it's something we're hardwired into. We can't get away from it. So the goal is what do we do with it? Everyone has a relationship, some sort of attachment relationship. It's essentially our bond to and with other people. That includes our children, it includes our own parents. It can even be considered to include our romantic relationship attachments, friendships. All of these things can be considered attachment relationships. We speak about it specifically as that special bond between the people that we turn to for comfort or support. So those people that we turn to when we need something that isn't just like an acquaintance or a friend. It is something that we see from little ones all the way through the lifespan. Nope, not that way. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So attachment, again, sometimes we think about attachment and we see it pretty easily in the parent and baby relationship. Babies are fairly helpless. They need us all the time for basically everything, including food, growth, development, safety, security, all of those things. But we don't just grow out of that attachment relationship when we become toddlers, then school-age children, then preteens and teens. It's still there. The trick becomes, as we start hitting those sometimes scary preteen and teen years, is that it gets really hard to see that relationship. It gets hard to sometimes notice all the positive aspects of attachment because we get a little bit overwhelmed by the more challenging aspects. And it's also difficult because it changes. the way that attachment is expressed over the lifespan changes. So it doesn't stay the same. The way that the attachment relationship is shown in the relationship with you and your baby is going to be very, very different than the relationship between you and your toddler all the way to preteen, teen, and then continuing through adulthood. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's part of normal development, that we grow and change. But when we're kind of looking at this from a parenting perspective, it can lead to some troubles because it means we've got to do some heavy duty adapting to be able to kind of keep up with and maintain that attachment relationship. So attachment, I already mentioned at the beginning, attachment is important to a whole bunch of aspects of our relationship with our children and their lives and livelihoods. So one of the big ones is attachment in child development. The best way to say this is that their development actually occurs in the context of our relationships with them. Again, pretty easy to think about when you see a little one, because they're completely dependent on you for everything. And that secure attachment piece helps us to, from a parenting perspective, helps us to be sensitive to the needs of our kids. That's that attunement piece. That relationship gives us what we need to be able to respond to what our kids are looking for. So this is not only the physical development, but also cognitive, emotional, and social. So again, you know, physical needs for everybody, cognitive, kids learn and grow. Kids learn through things that we teach them, but kids also learn through the behavior that they see around them all the day, every day. And so that's where that attachment relationship piece comes in really there as well. And then of course, same deal with emotional and social development. Right? We learn about social skills, we learn about social relationships in the context of relationships. So this is all really important to that. The trick is, as I said, with your child's changing developmental needs, right, as they move through that progression, toddler, school age, preteen and teen, their relationship keeps changing and their needs keep changing. And so this has a direct impact on our attachment relationship. And so what we as parents need to do is really reinvent ourselves and reinvent how we're expressing our side of that attachment relationship to meet the changing demands of our kids. And it's not gonna lie, this is hard work. This is not easy because some days it may feel like this changes on a daily basis. Other days you may feel like you get a stretch for like maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, but it is always changing. The other tricky part about this, so I'm just gonna go back for one sec, is that no attachment relationship is the same. Every child brings their own unique qualities and challenges to that attachment relationship. So for those of you who've got more than one kiddo in your care, that relationship is going to be a little bit different in each one of those relationships. The principles are the same, but that relationship is going to be very unique. And it may be impacted by things that are also outside of your control. So it might be impacted by learning difficulties they have, different personalities, and different life experiences that they have and you have as well.
I was just going to say, Crystal, I always feel like with 4 kids that I had to learn to be a parent 4 different times, and for each one of them, because with each one of them I thought, oh, I got it down this time, and each one of them were different. So I had to learn new skills with each of them. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you guys have had similar experiences, you are not alone. This is normal. It doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when you start to look at how do you develop that attachment relationship with your kiddo and with multiple kiddos. Another big part about attachment in the role of child development is basically attachment. We can think about it like a safety net for healthy development. When that attachment relationship is secure and strong, that's an excellent thing. And what that actually does is it gives our kids the confidence and the security to be able to learn and explore and grow in their environment. So that means reaching out and trying new things, trying new relationships. So whether that's peer relationships and those play dates you set up for them, or with their classmates at school, all of these things are really so much easier for our kiddos when they know that they've got that safe place in their relationship with you fall back on. So sometimes we'll call it their secure base, but that's basically what it is. One of the founding fathers of the attachment sort of theory, when we're looking about psychology, it was someone named John Bowlby. And what he really got him thinking about this was he just did some natural observation of young kids and their parents at the playground. And what he noticed, and you guys can think about this the last time, pre our current world situation, you guys were at the playground with your kids or with others, you know, and you just saw other people's kids. It's almost like you can think of it like an elastic band. There's this sense, especially with the younger ones, of they kind of start out with you, they keep really close to you, then they know that you're there, you're going to protect them, and then they kind of like wander out a little bit and they'll try something, but it's almost like they're attached to you by a rubber band, and so they'll need to keep checking in with you. Maybe they'll come all the way back, maybe they'll be like, hi mommy, hi daddy, but there's some sort of check-in, some sort of thing that they do that brings them back to connecting with you, because you are their safe base, secure base. The other part of that is that you are also their safe haven. And so same deal, as kiddos grow and develop and explore the world, they're gonna hit some bumps and bruises along the way. They're gonna realize that there's gonna be some hurts, there's gonna be disappointments, there's gonna be challenges that they don't quite face. And so when that attachment relationship with you as their parents and caregivers is secure, you're going to be that safe haven. You're going to be that safe place to come back to, and again, to check in and, you know, say, it's okay, we're going to figure this out. And again, a lot easier to see in younger children. They're going to naturally turn to mom or dad. Maybe sometimes you might be thinking too much so, you know. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had that experience where something happens and the kiddo, you know, your kiddo is only able to be comforted by one particular person or one particular way in that instance. But that's a good thing. Adolescence, like everything else, makes it more difficult because part of the natural way that they grow and develop in adolescence with their attachment relationships is to start to form those new ones. And so that peer group becomes more important, and they're also trying to figure out their independence. And so they often try to handle things on their own first, sometimes with mixed success, and we might wish they would have just come to us in the first place. But it is part of what they're growing and doing. And so that can make it challenging, because it can make it feel like a little bit sometimes, you know, they're on their own, they want to be independent, and then they're still coming to us for the tough stuff. Or we want to help them and support them with the tough stuff. We want to show them that we still love and care for them and we're there for them. But they kind of almost seem to push us away. And so it can be challenging. This is part of that cool part about being a parent as your kiddos grow, is that you have to kind of navigate that again, almost sometimes on a day-to-day basis. One of the important things as our kiddos grow, and you'll see it a lot, especially, you'll see it a little bit toddler, preschool, school, but especially when we start hitting that preteen and teen age, is balance in the attachment relationship. And so this is especially when kids start to realize they have some measure of independence. Their brains and body have developed enough that they can start to realize that they're separate. They're unique, and they are kind of trying to figure out what that is. And so there's this really important balance that goes on and back and forth, which is what is the balance between connection and independence? Or if we think about that safety net, where do they find the right balance between staying safe and comfortable and familiar in their world with you and the relationships they have, and then where do they kind of strike out on their own and mature and move forward to continue to grow and develop? And it's not it's not like an uphill linear process. You know, you don't kind of hit it and then you keep going. It goes up and down and back and forth. And it's a dynamic process between connection and independence. And so as your kiddos are starting to figure this out and what that means for them, again, it's going to look different for every single one. Also, your side of the attachment piece is also going to be changing and going to be constantly trying to figure out what is that balance. When do my kiddos need connection? When do they need independence? And are they able to ask for it, you know? And I just need to kind of follow their lead, or, you know, do some of them need a little bit maybe of that push towards independence, or do they need a little bit more reminding that they can come back and you're still going to be their safe haven? So it's a constant balance. Attachment is also really, really related to behavior. And this is a little bit sometimes harder for us to see, especially when we hit those preteen and teen years, because behaviors are messy and complicated, and they're not always easy to crack because there's nonverbals and verbals going on, and they don't always match up. If we think about behavior this way, we can say that, generally speaking, behavior is a way of communicating our feelings and expectations about having our attachment needs met. So in their relationships with you, when there's a behavior that you're seeing, that can be a way of kind of asking or feeling out for that independence or connection attachment need. But it's not clear. Sometimes it's super clear, you know, that would be the very direct, hey, mom, I need a hug, or hey, dad, let's go play out in the yard. Or hey, I'm having this problem at school or with this person. If it was always that easy, life would be a lot easier, but it's not. There's this complex dance of verbal and nonverbal communications. And our kiddos do it, and we do it too. And so you've got all these things floating around that we kind of have to figure out what is actually going on here. And if we think about it from an attachment perspective, if we're trying to figure out new ways to help and support and deal with the behavior, what does that behavior actually mean? What are my kiddos trying to communicate with that behavior so that we can address it more appropriately? This means, and I like this one, I like mysteries, so I like to think about this one as you kind of are constantly playing detective. You're trying to crack that code of the behavior and try and figure out what might be that attachment need that's underlying the behavior at any point in time. And good news, you know, that changes as well. Sometimes a specific behavior could be kind of looking for some connection and support. Other times it could be kind of needing some independence. And so you kind of always have to be sorting that out. And it can be easier at times. You know, at times you may have figured it out and you kind of have learned how to read your kiddos pretty well and get to know their moods, get to know what's going on for them. And so you're like, yes, this is a success. This is a win. We've got this. And then maybe like the very next minute or the next day, you know, it can be really difficult. All of a sudden you feel like, oh my gosh, who is this child? I don't understand this at all. This is made even more complicated because a lot of times our kiddos don't even know, especially when we're talking about preteens. Their brains have undergone this enormous development, but it's still not fully developed, right? They're still figuring things out. We know brain science has shown us that our brains are fully not developed until they're talking like mid to late 20s now. So there's still a lot of brain development that has to happen. And so sometimes, you know, even if our kids want to be able to express something, they just don't know how to do that. And there was an interesting experiment. It's a little bit older now, but actually the research has been supported, is that these guys, Shrufy and Waters, they did an experiment with little kids because they were trying to figure out that it was with toddlers and caregivers. They were trying to figure out that some toddlers didn't really seem to mind when they were left alone with a stranger. They were kind of a little bit distressed, but when the parent came back, they were okay, or they would avoid contact with mom or dad that came back. They weren't really crying out, and they wouldn't kind of try to reconnect that attachment. And so then outside, trying to kind of guess what was going on, people were theorizing, okay, maybe they're just like really mature, they've already kind of progressed, they're getting more of that independence, or maybe a little bit more on the other side, maybe they're just struggling with that attachment relationship, maybe they're not really engaged. The interesting thing was when these guys did the experiment is they actually put little heart monitors on the kiddos because they wanted to see what's going on biologically. Is there something underneath? There's something in that behavior that we could monitor that the kiddos can't express because they're toddlers that might give us a different view of what's going on. And what they actually found was that on the little ones that kind of seemed to like not really mind, were maybe disengaged, they actually, their heart rate was way higher than kiddos who were more externally and visibly distressed, the ones that were crying, you know, had a really hard time when parents left and then came back. And so this really got them thinking about, you know, if we just went on that behavior alone, we would completely misread that situation. We would think those kiddos were the most okay, but in this instance, they actually had the most distress going on for them underneath. And so that's where we kind of have to when we're trying to figure out this whole dance between behavior and the message that's being communicated, it can be hard work because it's not always straightforward, and what we're seeing or what we think we're seeing isn't always necessarily the case. And then we have to add on to that is that we have our own emotional reactions to behaviors and situations. And so not only now do we have to be the detectives and try and crack the code of the behavior and kind of sort through what's going on for our kiddos, but sometimes, you know, we've got a history of our own in our past, or maybe, you know, we've seen a pattern with our kiddos that's developed over a long period of time that we're reacting to now. And so we now have to kind of sort through that as well, which makes understanding that needs underneath that behavior even more challenging. Not to sound, I feel like this sounds really like negative and oh my gosh, you're never going to be able to do it. That's not true at all. You guys already, I'm sure, can think about times where you're doing this and doing this quite naturally. This is really just more to help you guys to understand that you're not wrong. This is tricky. It gets trickier. And so you're not the only ones that might be struggling with this. It also gets really difficult when we start to think about different ways to maybe deal with some of those communication or behavior problems we're seeing with our preteens. Sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we think that if we try to step back and we try to understand that attachment need that's going on behind behavior and look at it in a different way, we're kind of condoning the problem. We're saying, oh, the behavior is okay because this was going underneath it. That's not it at all. Trying to understand that attachment need underneath the behavior doesn't mean that anything goes and that all behaviors are okay. But it just gives us an option to try to understand things in a different way. And again, especially with your preteens, as you're starting to notice, maybe you're getting into this pattern of behaviors where you're repeating the same conflicts or you're repeating the same challenging situations. Trying to kind of put this detective hat on and start to think about behavior and attachment and the link between them can actually just open doors to make new ways to respond to the situation that help you to progress further. And respond in a new way so that you're not just repeating old patterns and feel like for you and probably for your kiddos that you're just beating your head against a brick wall, right? That you're just repeating the same thing over and over and they're not listening, it's not getting through to them, nothing's working. But if you can kind of take a different viewpoint and try and see what might be that attachment need underneath that behavior, this can open up a whole new world of responding to it. All right. Also, when we understand the attachment needs underneath the behavior, we can respond in ways that actually it's that modeling that I talked about. It actually helps our kiddos sort out their feelings and needs so that they can be more clearly communicated. Part of the difficulty with this dance is that, as I said, you know, kids sometimes may not even know what those needs are. They may be struggling to understand and sort out what they're feeling. And when we can start to understand and put a name to that attachment needs, we can actually model that for them and help them to recognize what they're feeling and why it prompted those behaviors or decisions. And then together work on a way to communicate those things more clearly and less convolutedly, and possibly with less conflict, so that we can come to better solutions with them and we don't need to go through this whole dance all the time. And when that happens, that problem behavior, those patterns that we hate that we're in over and over, can actually be reduced. And the positive consequence is that attachment relationship between us and our kiddos is actually just strengthened more and more. And then makes the next situation that we get into easier to deal with because we've got that strong bond in our favor. Attachment and parenting. So this is the next sort of key piece. This is all great, all right? Attachment, yeah, it's related to development. Attachment is related to behavior. Cool, I get it. Well, what does that have to do with parenting? And I really like the way that this is put there on the slide, which is why we included it for you. Attachment is a shared relationship. Attachment doesn't exist in isolation. So you need two people to form an attachment relationship. And in this case, that means child and parents. It's a shared partnership. So when we're looking at strengthening that attachment relationship and how it impacts our parenting, you build the relationship together, you change it together, and then you're both changed and strengthened by it. So it's a really key part, is that when we're looking at using the principles of attachment and understanding attachment to make those changes in our relationships, it's a shared thing. We can't, our kiddos can't do it on their own. We can't do it all on our own. We need the two pieces to come together. So how do we do that? A big part of this is empathy. Empathy is a critical part of attachment and parenting, but it's not always easy. It's really, really hard to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and try and understand what's going on for them, try and figure out what that behavior is, or what that attachment need is underneath the behavior when we're in the middle of a fight or an argument. That's probably the last thing on our minds, is we don't really want to be kind of seeing our kiddo's perspective or our partner's perspective, whatever the relationship is. Let's be honest, more times we're probably more intent on sort of making sure that our point and our voice is heard, which can be important, but it's not a key component of empathy. Empathy is also really difficult because sometimes we kind of feel like, and I think I've seen there's a bit of a misconception, I think, out there these days, that sort of empathy is something you're sort of born with or you're not. It's not true. Empathy is a skill. It's a learned skill. It's something you had to learn how to do. It's something you're teaching your kiddos how to do. And so, it is something good news that if if you've struggled with, or you think your kiddo struggled with, it's something that you can learn. It's not all or nothing. Either you have it or you don't. And again, as with sort of stepping back and trying to understand things from a new perspective, the really cool thing about empathy is that using empathy can, again, open a new door and new options for being a parent and being in relationships. So if we kind of take a situation where maybe it's been really, really hard to have empathy in the past, but now we start to kind of try and use it and try and get that different perspective, again, it can just open new options for how we respond to the situation and how we understand our kiddos and maybe what's going on for them, and give us sort of more of an insight or of a different way to be able to help support them. And for ourselves as well. Empathy is a really key skill to have and give to other people. It's also something we need to give to ourselves. It's that piece that lets us recognize we're not going to get it perfect every time, and that's okay. Again, it doesn't mean the attachment relationship has failed just because you're not 100% empathic 100% of the time. It just means that, you know what? You just need to give yourself some of that empathy in those more challenging moments. So again, I really like how this all comes together here. Your understanding and behavior in the relationship has a powerful impact on your child's behavior and development. It goes back to that piece of attachment impacts all of these areas. Attachment is related to child development, attachment is related to behavior, and attachment is related to parenting, because they're all connected. Child development, the behaviors that you see in the relationship, and the parenting relationship are all connected. And so your understanding and behavior in any one of these, but especially in all three of them, can have a really powerful impact on your kiddo, even if they don't know it. You can make really powerful changes by just responding to things differently, even if your kiddos aren't necessarily able to follow suit right away. And then again, by understanding that attachment in your relationship, you get new ways to respond. So you just have new options to support that healthy development and strengthen the bond between you and your child. And you come up with new ways for them to respond to situations. So it doesn't just have to be situations with you and your kiddo, but again, all of this, you're teaching them, all of these attachment pieces, all these beautiful relationship pieces have implications for other areas as well, including their relationships with their peers, one day their own romantic relationships, and then one day their own relationships with their kiddos as well. So attachment is a really powerful, that's why we say it exists from cradle to grave. It's a really, really powerful way to understand our relationships with our kiddos. All right. Okay. All right, so we are going to jump into a bit of a reflection activity because, it's like, okay, I've been talking for 45 minutes now. So what does this actually mean? This is all great in theory. There's some great principles here, Great. How might this actually work, and how does this actually look? So what we've got a little activity for you guys, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead you through this step by step, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes after each step. And I'd encourage you, if you have the means, to actually write down your answers. Give this a moment, think about this, write it down, and then what we'll do at the end is we'll open it up, and if anybody wants to share, I'll give you some more instructions on what we'll have you share if you feel comfortable. So first of all, first step is pretty easy, so identify. So just think about a recent difficult situation with your kiddo, and just kind of to identify as much as you can about it. So what happened? When did it start? How did it start? Is it a situation? Is it a pattern? Is there a pattern that you're constantly going through with your kiddo? Or was this a new one that came up sort of completely out of the blue and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. So think about that. Try and think about as much detail as possible. And yeah, I'm gonna give you guys a couple of minutes here to go through that one, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so hopefully you could all call to mind a challenging situation. So what I want you to do next is think back and think about, and this is probably unconscious, but think about what meaning did you give to your child's behavior? How did you interpret it? How did you understand what their behavior was trying to communicate to you? What label did you give it? So take a second and think about that. Well, a minute or two. And if you don't know, that's okay too. You might not be aware of that because we do this pretty unconsciously, especially in those repeated patterns. But give yourself a minute, and you don't have to get it right. Guess, what meaning might you have given to it that kind of prompted your reaction. Okay, so hopefully you were able to come up with at least a possible sort of explanation that you had in the moment, because what I want you to do now is, and literally this is brainstorming, there's no right or wrong here, thinking about sort of these pieces about attachment and what that might be underneath the behavior. What might they be trying to express? What other possible meaning or meanings, because there might be more than one right answer, what might exist? What's another way that you could take that step back, crack that code, put on your detective hat, and what other meaning could you give to that situation instead? What other thing might your kiddo have been trying to communicate? Okay, so hopefully you've been able to come up with a few other meanings, because this is the application part. So this is that part about what possible doors do you think, or options do you think this might open for you if you were going to handle a similar situation? So if you think about one of those possible meanings you jotted down, if you go back to that same situation and it were to happen again, or something very similar in the future, but this time when it happened, you were able to put a different meaning to what was going on for your kiddo, how might that change how you handle the situation? Or would it? I mean, some you might have a really great example of a really great way you already did this quite naturally. But hopefully you thought about one that was a little bit more challenging for this purpose. But yeah, think about what door does that actually open if you kind of give a different spin to it. For you, how do you handle it a little bit differently? I'll give you guys a couple more minutes here, and then yeah, see what you come up with. Okay, so I'm going to walk you guys through just a really quick little example of how this might look, and then maybe we'll turn it over to you and see if anybody wants to share. So this is a really common one that I see a lot. So a recent difficult situation. You've got a kiddo who suddenly starts refusing to go to school, just absolutely drags their heels, doesn't want to go to school, doesn't, just no explanation, can't really explain why, but they're just absolutely not really wanting to go to school. And so typically, you might be tempted to say, oh, they're just being stubborn, or they're being defiant. They don't recognize that this is important. They're just not getting it. They're just trying to test their limits and see if I'm really going to follow through. Any kind of number of meanings like that. But if we brainstorm and we take that step back and we think about what's going on, maybe the next time it happens, you realize, well, it's not actually happening every day. It's only happening when the kiddo has this certain class with this certain teacher. And then you remember that the teacher is actually a new teacher, and they started right about the time that your kiddo really didn't want to go to school. And so you're like, okay, maybe there's a connection there. Maybe instead of just not wanting to go to school or being stubborn or hating school, you know what, maybe there's something more going on here. Maybe there's actually some anxiety. Maybe there's some worry or fear that's really prompting this. And so what you could do, this might mean then what happens in the next time it happens, maybe the next time, instead of pushing through, maybe you kind of name that. And maybe you say, you know what, I'm noticing that this is happening on this certain day, and I remembered that you got a new teacher, and I'm wondering if you're actually really worried about something, or maybe something happened in that class that you really don't know how to deal with. Maybe, is that what happened? And if that's the case, maybe this gives you a new way to handle that. So instead of getting into the same old arguments, now what you've done is you've actually named that, oh my goodness, there's some really big anxiety or worry about something that happened in that classroom or with that transition that is actually driving what's going on. And now you and your kiddo can talk about it, and you can start to brainstorm, either, helping them to work through if it's nothing big, or if there's really a big problem, maybe the teacher picks on them, or maybe the teacher has a completely different style of teaching that they don't know how to deal with. But now you have a different option in working through this and getting them to go back to school than you might if you just kind of keep seeing it as this endless battle. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Like I said, there's not really a right or wrong here. It's not an A to B, because each one might be different, but this is sort of the idea, is how do you start to think about it in a different way. So what I'd like to do is, if anybody feels comfortable, and I don't know what would be easiest, I guess if you want, you can unmute yourself and share, or you can just type in the chat box. Maybe sort of something new that you kind of figured out or kind of thought about when you were going through this process. Yeah. Anybody want to share? Go ahead, Sherry, if you want to either type it in the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself, you should be able to, and you can just share if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I thought it'd just be easier to talk. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did your exercise, but my example was the opposite of yours. Instead of seeing it as just defiance, recognizing that there's something deeper. So I wanted to get a sense of what might be a different application. So your last point. So anyways, okay, my situation identify here is doing schoolwork is a problem. It's a challenge, and yes, it's a pattern. Reflect, the meaning I give is her difficulty with attention, her self-image of being smart enough. Brainstorming, I think what other meanings might exist are pushing back at mom, trying to get it canceled so she can go to her iPad. And so how can I apply, what options might this create for handling a similar situation? Because both my meaning and brainstorm were quite deep dives, right?
Yeah. So I guess would be, what would you do if you took a different meaning? Again, there's not a right or wrong here. If you think about what you would typically, how you would typically handle the situation, what would it be if you took one of those other ones? what would you do differently? So think about the last time that situation came up, how you handled it. Would thinking about what happened differently, would that give you a new way to handle it? Would you say
Well,
something
yes.
different? Yep.
Yes, but the only other ways I'm thinking of what it means is I'm having a hard time communicating this. Like all of the examples I have
Mhm.
are related to her boundaries, her self-concept, and so I'm
Yep.
responding in those ways, with reassurances, with pushing back, with challenges, with supporting, with all kinds of things. Yeah, so I don't know what other meaning could. Do you have an example? Like, what other meaning could I interpret? Then my reaction isn't so either pushing back, or those are the only two reactions I have. Is either I push back and get frustrated, or I'm uber supportive and reconnect and empathize with how hard it is and give her help and give her examples and give her support. So I don't know what other kind of reaction I could have.
That's a great example, yeah, where when you're in that pattern, right, you get kind of involved in your emotions kind of drive what happens, for sure. Cassandra, did you want to kind of weigh in here on some different ways to look at this?
Well, I was interested to see what you're going to say, Crystal. But I was just thinking, you actually had another, Sherry, you had another hypothesis or another possible meaning that you threw out. You said maybe she's just hoping that if she, what did you say? If she makes this difficult,
If it gets canceled,
it'll get
yeah.
canceled. And you know what? That sounds like that might actually be different than how you have been approaching it up to this point. And that's really where Crystal's coming from is, if the things that you've been doing haven't been working, maybe there's another way to look at this. And it sounds like maybe there's one that you have a new hypothesis about what might be going on. That might be that she is really wanting to get through it as quickly as possible or avoid it to
avoid it. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what you were going to say, Crystal. Sorry.
No, I think along that point, you spoke to, it's really hard, and I think this is common that we see, it's really hard not to go to one extreme or the other. Like you said, you're either sort of like really challenging or pushing, or you're like uber supportive. And so, is there a middle ground between those two? Is there a way that maybe it's, maybe there's a structure piece that you can do in the middle that kind of takes parts of both of those and gives you that new option. So you're not feeling like you have to either be challenging and pushing back and working through that, or you have to be super supportive. But, hey, yeah, is there a way to do both in that moment? And does that give you a different response to change the pattern?
Okay. All right. I'll think about that. Thanks.
Yeah. And I know this gets tricky because the benefit/difficult part about thinking about attachment relationships in this way is that there's not necessarily a prescriptive answer. There's not necessarily an A plus B equals C. And that can be really frustrating if that's what you're looking for, but it can also be really freeing because like we've been talking about, there's a lot of freedom in being able to step back and recognize the uniqueness of each of your relationships with your kiddos, and to recognize it might not be one right answer, right? It may be a little more work because you got to figure it out each time, or you got to figure it out in different situations. But you're not also just limited to only one way of doing things. There's a whole bunch of things you could do. Cassandra, did you want to add?
No, I was just going to say I actually did the exercise myself just with one of my kids. So if you wanted another sort of run through on just for people's practice to see how we can go through this, then I can do that quickly.
Yeah, please.
I didn't see anybody else jump into the bait here, which is totally fine. So yeah, Cassandra, if you don't mind, why don't you walk us through another one? That's great.
Sure. I was thinking about my 15-year-old son and how on the weekend I was trying to have a conversation with him. So I was trying to connect with him, and so I would ask him a question, and he'd give me a one-word answer. And I'd ask him another question, and it felt like an inquisition. Like it was kind of awkward feeling like I'm trying to have this conversation, and he's answering me, but it's this like yes or no, and I'd answer an open-ended, or I'd ask an open-ended question. And then he would seem to give me the shortest possible answer, which, so what meaning did I give to that? was that he was just being difficult and kind of felt like he was being a jerk to me. I'm trying really hard to connect, and it just wasn't happening. But as I thought about this some more, so what other possible meanings would this be? I realized that I don't know that he realized that I was trying to connect. I think that another possible potential is that he actually probably thought he was doing what he needed to do. He was answering my questions. And so he didn't get the whole me trying to connect, that was actually, I didn't really care about the answers to the questions. I was actually just trying to connect with him. And so what might the options, I think I just need to have a conversation with him about, like what I was trying to do there. I wasn't actually trying to be in an inquisition with him. I was actually just wanting to get to know, he's my kid, but just to have a conversation and connect with him. And it wasn't about the answers to the question. So that's probably the conversation I need to have with him, because I really, if I think about it, I think his interpretation of what was going on was that I was trying to get answers to questions, which wasn't what I was trying to do. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but I thought it might be just interesting to hear another example.
That's a great example, and I like that. I love that one, Cassandra, because I think it really speaks to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is that communication part that's so important to all of this. And as much as our kiddos do it, we're sometimes guilty of that too, is we do something and we think we're being really clear about what our intent is, but we're working in two different pages here than our kiddos, and our kiddos do the same thing, right? They've got something going on in their head. They've got a whole backstory about what they're trying to accomplish in an interaction with you, but that's not clear. And so you guys are actually working from two different scripts, and that's where some of that friction can be. So yeah, that's a great example of just going through that process. And then just recognizing that, sometimes it starts even before the interaction. It starts with, hey, how did we set this up? How did we actually approach this? And were we actually on the same page, or were we as clear as we thought we were with our kiddos? Because that can be really difficult. But no, hopefully that was helpful. Thank you guys so much for sharing, Sherry and Cassandra. That's awesome. And like I said, this is just a really small way to start to kind of think about how you might be able to use and understand attachment to kind of deal with things differently. And again, it might be a little frustrating because there's not like a right answer, but I think, this is more true to how life is. There's not always one right answer for these things. And so this process can be really helpful. The more that you practice it, even if you don't always come up with a perfect solution. And sometimes, you might recognize it might be a good activity to say, hey, you know what? No, I was already doing this. I did I did catch that, no, my kiddo was actually feeling like this instead of like this. So it can be, again, it's important to be really recognizing all the positives and strengths you already are doing as well. All right. So that is our kind of overview of attachment in a nutshell. So what I want to do with you guys just for a few minutes here is go over the Connect Parent Group. This is an attachment principle-based parenting group that we are hoping to be able to start to offer at Rocky Mountain Psychological Services. And it's based entirely on these principles that we've talked about. It's attachment based, and it's really based on all these things like understanding attachment in a new way. So I'm going to go through this quickly with you, and then we will open up for a few questions at the end, and a little more information for you guys. So but yeah, if you have a burning question in between here, feel free to type it and I'll see if we can answer it in between times. So the Connect Parent Group is approximately 10 weeks. Each week focuses on a specific principle. So every week you're looking at a new attachment-based principle to help you to understand and manage the relationship with your kiddo. There's also role plays and reflective exercises, sort of similar to the one that we walked you through tonight, that can kind of help to solidify the principle and then help you to practice those skills. It's a structured structured group. It's not a free-flowing parent support group, so we do have tools and strategies and things to bring forward to you and ideas to share, and it's not just sort of like just sort of a venting group about what's going on for you. There's a little more structure than that, but there's always space to share your experiences and talk about how these principles are working as you apply them. And it's cumulative, so it really builds. They're set up in a really cool way so that we kind of give you a little bit at a time and make it more complex and deep and challenging as you go along, so that hopefully by the time you're done the 10 weeks, you feel like you're, you know, pretty pro at understanding this attachment thing and how it might work in your relationships. These are the principles, so these are the core things that we really go through. All behavior has meaning. We gave you a bit of a taste of that today, but we really dive deeper into what that means and what that looks like. Attachment is for life. Conflict, everybody's favorite or not favorite word. We really talk about, yeah, actually conflict is a part of even the most secure and healthy attachment relationships. And so what does that look like? We talk about independence or autonomy and connection. So that balance that we talked about today, that when you're looking at building that secure attachment relationship with your kiddos through their preteen and teen years, it's going to be a balance between their independence and their growing independence and their connection with you. Empathy, talked a lot about that already today. It's a huge part of attachment relationship, and so we really dive deeper into that, including that piece about needing to be empathic with yourself as well. Needs, so not just our kids aren't the only ones who have attachment needs, parents do as well. And so how do we find the balance in being what our kids needs, but also having that for ourselves? Change is a part of attachment, so we talk a lot about this role that it does change, and it's going to continue to change throughout the lifetime, and what that means for you and how you can use that understanding to navigate your parenting in a different way. Celebrating attachments, it's important to celebrate. That strong, close relationship, that attachment bond is hugely important, and so we're celebrating. And so we want to make sure it's not just always about the negatives, but also the strengths and the positives and successes you're having in those relationships. And then looking forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're not going to get it perfect every time, but it's really important to stay the course and to keep doing what you're doing, and you will get where you want to be in the end. Connect has been really well researched. It's actually was developed in Canada, so it's a homegrown local group that was started in BC and has had lots of research done over the years. Research finds that people who participate in Connect find that they better understand their kiddos' behaviors. It helps them to navigate their relationship with their kiddos, and also gives them increased understanding about yourself as a parent, where maybe some of the things you're doing come from and how it impacts your parenting now with your kiddos. And then again, learning some of those cool skills, including deeper understanding of what it means to step back, using empathy, and then using those conflict and difficult situations constructively. Some really cool stats about how effective the Connect Parent Group program is. After completing it, 97% of parents feel better equipped to help understand their kiddos. 95% feel better equipped to understand themselves as a parent. And then 86% saw positive changes in their relationships as a result of applying all of those Connect principles.
So at this point in time, I'd like to ask individuals, just for our benefit, this is where you get to help us understand your needs better. If you would take just a few seconds and answer these 2 questions, and then I can display the aggregate results. So you won't be identified individually, but we'd like to know how we can support you in the future, as Crystal mentioned. So I'm going to give you another about 10 seconds. And then we can do this right. Okay. All right. If everybody's got their polls in, and I will share results. So it looks like 44% of you are yes, 44 are undecided, and then most of you feel that it's better in early 2021. I think one of the things that that I wanted to share with you, and I think this is what Cassandra and Crystal were mentioning, is that there's only room for 10 individuals or 10 instances or 10 couples at the most. in this program because it is a group-based program, and we want to make sure that everybody gets the right support. So anyways, one of the things that I think if you needed to do before 2021 to connect with Crystal, you could feel her enthusiasm through this thing. She is a subject matter expert on this thing. And so if you wanted to book a session one-on-one with her, of course, this is an opportunity for you to do that. And unless Crystal, you wanted to say something, can we open it up for questions, or did you want to add something? Or Cassandra, did you want to add something?
No, I think just, yeah, this is basically an intro. Attachment is a growing field. We're learning more and more about it. There's lots of ways to apply it. The Connect group is one way. It's a really great way for some older kiddos. There's also lots of other ways. Like Shamir was saying, if you guys are looking, if you're interested maybe in the group, but maybe a little bit later, we have lots of options at RMPS with myself or one of my colleagues. And so, yeah, there's lots of options for you to kind of take this and get some more support in it if you feel like you'd like that over the next little bit. Yeah, but then other than that, I think Cassandra, unless you wanted to add something to wrap up, if you guys have questions, again, you can type them in the chat and we'll try to answer them. Or I guess, Shamir, can they mute and ask questions if you feel comfortable?
Absolutely, yeah. You can feel free to unmute and ask your questions. So Jennifer asked the question, what is the fee for this group? And, I can answer this question because I'm the office manager. I deal with a lot of the financial part of this thing. Cassandra and Crystal can chime in, but right now we have not figured out what the fee is because we wanted to know, exactly how many people are interested, and the more people that are interested, the fee goes down. So if you're interested, stay in touch with us. We sign up for our newsletters, and we'll be happy. And the link will be sent out with the replay where you can sign up for our newsletter so we can keep you informed on these things. And then we'll publish the fee once we've figured out the structure and the format of this. There are other questions coming through.
Jennifer's asking, what are some examples of attachment activities for preteens that are different than for younger children?
I can take it, or Cassandra, do you wanna?
Crystal?
One of the biggest differences as kiddos get older, and a little bit to sort of Cassandra's example, is you'll notice they're going to want some of that independence more, and so their time with you might be shorter. So you're going to be looking, instead of really long like weekend family things or whole evening family things, you're going to be looking for shorter opportunities to connect. So that might be, if your kiddos are involved outside of the situation in sports, extracurricular activities, it might be a bi-weekly or every other event, you stop for hot chocolate or coffee at Tim's and you guys just chat about how the event went, or you kind of have that really casual conversation that's not like an interrogation about, school or what you might normally have. Games, online games, depending on your stance with this, if your kiddos are really online gamers, get them to create a character for you and play with them online and kind of introduce you to their worlds, for short periods of time. They might think you're a little bit strange if you kind of suddenly start doing that. But in my experience, kiddos love to be the teachers about those things. So that can be another really great way to connect as well. Did you want to add, Cassandra?
Oh, I was thinking about my kids, and my kids really got into the would you rather type questions.
Yeah.
Or those kinds of things where we just got a chance to share a little bit about ourselves. They seem to really like those, and they're not really long and involved, but it's just a way to have, like Crystal was talking about, those shorter but meaningful connections with your kids. Great. Jennifer says, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
That's great. If nobody else has any questions or comments, we can certainly, we're open to send us an email, ask us any questions that you can hit reply with the note you get about the replay. So we'll be sending out a replay in a day or two, and then we're open for whatever conversations you may have. There's something else coming through here. Rue, he says, great session. I always take a little bit away from each of your webinars. Well, thank you. We appreciate that constructive feedback. Thank you so much, Ru. Appreciate that. We're excited to be here too. As you can see, the enthusiasm in both Cassandra and Crystal. So Sherry is asking, how can we sign up for notices to learn when you will be ready with a Connect parent group? What you can do, Sherry, is in the email that we send out with the replay, there will be an opportunity for you to sign up to our notifications. It's an notifications where we'll send out the announcements of that. So what I can do right now is, promise you that you will not be missed, and we'll get you on that list very quickly. Okay. I don't see any other things coming. So Cassandra and Crystal, do you want to just wave everybody goodbye? Closing comments?
Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you for our next webinar and hopefully in the Connect group. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. It was so great to share. Like Shamir said, I love this stuff. So hopefully you guys found some of it useful, at least a little nugget you can apply. And yeah, feel free to connect with us in whatever way is going to be most helpful for you in the future. We're happy to continue the conversation with you. So thanks so much.
Take care.